Kia ora koutou, welcome back to Boots Theory. I am Stephanie, your magnificent hostess. So I said in my introduction video that I had two clear ideas of what I wanted to do when I finally decided to bite the bullet and make my own YouTube channel. And one of them, which should already have dropped, was a deep dive into two of my favourite TV series, Babylon 5 and Deep Space Nine, and crowning a supreme winner, the only winner it could ever have been. Go fight me in the comments over there. The other was this, knitting content. I really love watching other people organise their yarn stash and set out their knitting plans for the year and set goals and fight to achieve them when knitting and crochet are such magnificently chaotic hobbies. And I have quite a substantial yarn stash myself. I got into knitting maybe 5-8 years ago, mostly through my grandmother, who cracked the code for me by showing me that if you knit small items for baby charities, you get really quick gratification of completing a project, and then that leads you into bigger and bigger projects as time goes on. And so I started accumulating a bit of a yarn stash. This was then helped, not helped, I can't decide, by a friend of mine who was in the same antenatal class as us when we had our daughter, who chose to move back overseas with her partner and their child and had a big yarn stash that she needed to get rid of. So I took it, and I've been trying to work through a lot of that ever since. So I've learned a couple of big lessons on my yarn journey about the kind of stash I want to have. I do enjoy having a large stash, so this is not going to be a road to zero journey. But I know more about what kinds of fibre I want to knit and crochet with. Not cotton, never cotton, not acrylic. Sorry, we can have a big cultural consciousness raising session afterwards about New Zealanders' attitudes to acrylic and wool versus American or British attitudes to acrylic versus wool. But let's put that to one side for now. And also about quantity. You see, I am a fat woman, which means if I'm going to knit garments for myself, besides hats and gloves, I do have quite tiny hands, big head though, whole other story. If I'm going to make a cardigan or a sweater, or God forbid a knitted dress for myself, I need to buy a lot more yarn. And that starts getting a lot more expensive if I'm also going to be fussy about fibre content and colour and texture, which I am. On the other hand, I do also enjoy buying a special skein of yarn to commemorate things like being out of town and visiting a local yarn shop that I will never get to visit again, or events like the Upper Hutt Fibre Festival or Wollington, which are local indie dyer events. The risk is that just keeps growing and growing and growing with no purpose or strategy for actually using the stuff I'm acquiring. And that wouldn't actually be a bad thing if it weren't a source of stress for me. This is not going to be a judgy stash busting process where I tell you that you should be destashing, or that everything in your stash should have a purpose, or that you can't just keep pretty things in a 2x4 Kallax for the sake of having pretty things in your 2x4 Kallax. Because I want to have pretty things in my 2x4 Kallax. But that is one of the goals I am setting for myself. I want my yarn stash to fit a certain space, a 2x4 Kallax. Technically 7 of the 8 squares, because the other is where I keep all of my needles and notions and other things. I would like my stash to be more intentional. So there's a lot of yarns that I am not particularly enamored of, which I probably want to use up on charity knits or crochet projects, and the rest I want to either have a set project, a set idea, or I want it to be in a kind of rolling surplus of yarn for one-off projects when, for example, friends have babies, or one of the charities that I knit for has a hat drive or a vest drive or a sock drive. I'm really going to get into socks this year. That's another one of the goals. I'm a process person, so let's talk about the process. I am going to pull out the entire yarn stash and hopefully pile it, not haphazardly, onto this sofa. It's been about 2 years since I did a full reset of the stash, a full breakdown of everything that I've got, so I want to reassess how I'm storing things, how I'm categorizing things, and what's ended up in the wrong box, because things have inevitably ended up in the wrong box, or all in a tangle. I'm going to weigh it all, and taking inspiration from Retro Claude, whose stash busting series is truly one of the best on YouTube, I'm going to convert that weight into the equivalent number of 50-gram balls or skeins of yarn, because that just feels like a more pleasing way to count than sheer volume. That will all go into a table in Microsoft Word, which will have all the details of the different balls and colors and quantities. And then I'll condense that into a spreadsheet where hopefully I'll be able to show you a few little tricks of how I keep that organized, and also make it just a very pleasing way to keep recording what I've used up as I progress through my projects. I am a Ravelry user, so the obvious question is, why am I not doing this on Ravelry? Because I don't update my Ravelry. It's the last step of any project, is taking a photo and uploading it and the notes I've taken into Ravelry. And yes, I could keep the notes in Ravelry as I go instead of keeping them in a notepad file on my desktop, but that's just not what works for me. And one of the things I have really learnt over stash busting, over tracking my yarn, but also tracking things like my cosmetics and my skincare, because I'm a bit of a hoarder on those too, is you've got to use the process that actually works for your brain rather than the process everyone else uses. So if you use Ravelry to keep track of your yarn stash, I salute you, but it would not be an effective approach for me. The other advantage of a spreadsheet is that I can really gamify the whole process. So I can set a certain proportion of my stash that I want to use up, or a certain proportion of the cottons or the acrylics. I can keep track of how far I am towards my goal and how far I am through the year, and are they matching? Am I ahead? Do I need to increase my daily average yarn use? It's just, I'm a neurodivergent millennial. This is just what we do. A few disclaimers, mostly for my own brain. I'm not counting finished projects that I don't like, or where the dye has run and I want to frog it, reclaim the yarn and make something new. They can just live in their own little box until I'm ready to deal with those projects. There is a bunch of yarn I'm not counting, such as this. Is this not the cutest thing? It's magnetic. I love it. It was a Christmas gift from my grandma. Thank you, Grandma. But this yarn is not my stash. This yarn is from Crafting Threads of Aroha, one of the charities I do a lot of knitting and crochet for. They take donations of yarn, they distribute it to their network of knitters and crocheters. We make garments, we bring them back. Those garments are sent out to families and babies in need. It's very heartwarming, but I'm not taking responsibility for that. That's not my yarn. Yes, it ended up in my house, but I don't see why that should be my problem. I also already know that there's about 150 grams of yarn I need to purchase in order to finish projects that I either have underway or where I know I haven't got enough yarn. But those projects are set in stone, so those purchases are just going to happen. They have dedicated projects, so they are okay purchases. In my book, obviously. Again, this is my value system. It doesn't have to be yours. Now, the spreadsheet for last year actually says I used up a whopping 320 balls of yarn. And that's not true. It is true. They were there in my stash at the beginning of the year and they're not there now, but I did a number of big, quick holiday projects over the previous summer. Summer is January for us. We're in the Southern Hemisphere. So I did some big scrappy blanket projects that were very quick to work up and use, like this one. There was also a bunch of yarn that I donated to our local community centre's drop-in room. And there was some stuff that frankly I did throw out because I wasn't going to make anything with it and I didn't feel comfortable passing it on to other people, whether it was because of the composition or the quantity, or just sometimes you just need to chuck stuff in the bin. Again, maybe you don't. I am so happy for you. But sometimes I just need to not look at a thing anymore and not have it weighing on my brain. And I try not to do that too much, but a little bit can go a long way in terms of mental health and well-being. So the ultimate goal is fit the stash into the Kallax. That is not going to happen this year. You are going to see why. The cones. But in the meantime, try to use up 100 balls net equivalent. And there's a few projects I definitely have in mind for things like the cotton that I want to use up. I want to make some washcloths, some makeup pads, a couple of sundresses for my daughter. I have 3 current works in progress that I want to finish that will all be pretty quick to finish. I want to use up all the acrylic, probably just with a stash busting granny square blanket like the one behind me. And on top of that, I want to make 1 more cardigan for myself, which will bring my collection of hand knitted cardigans to 5, and 2 more items for my daughter, which I will describe when I actually get to those in the count. So those are all the notes I had for this introductory bit. I am going to turn off the camera, turn on the air conditioning, get all of the yarn out, hopefully fit it on the sofa, and none of that is going to happen for you because you are going to see what I achieve in 3, 2, 1. So, here we are. It fits. Just. Nope. There's still 2. There's still another box. And a bag of stuff. 1 second. Right. Precarious as this is, I'm actually going to start with the stuff that's over here first, which are my works in progress. Why is there an air pump in here? So this is one that I do not have yarn to finish, but I will need to purchase yarn to finish because I completely messed up the math when I was trying to adjust the pattern for the quantity of yarn I had. When you're counting pattern repeats, don't suddenly forget that each repeat is 10 rows, because if you then count the repeats as rows, you will not have enough yarn. In any case, this is going to be the Red Riding Hood by Anne-Sophie Peterson, because I decided this year is the year I also get into hooded scarves. I don't like most hats on me. I'm going to try berets a bit more too, but I don't like most hats on me, and in general I don't like squishing my hair down. It's a moot point today because my hair is straightened, but normally when it's curly I don't like having hat hair, so there will be more yarn purchased for that. We'll just put a pin in it. This is the body of the Helix pullover by Jessie Made Designs. I really love this, except I've had to learn to purl in a different direction because otherwise it was creating some gapping around the lace pattern. Obviously it needs sleeves, and to knit the sleeves I will need to use the rest of this. So this is the first thing that's going to go on the scales. The next whip we have is my kind of self-drafted hexagon cardie. The sleeves are inside out, or am I holding it inside out? We'll never know. Such is the nature of crochet. This is mostly based on the Granny Hexagon Cardigan by Kelly Phelps. This is using up some possum yarn I was donated quite a while ago. It mostly just needs ribbing around the bottom and the sleeves and the neckline, which I will do in the black. But here is all the possum yarn that's left, so let's weigh that up. Another work in progress which I've had for a while is this Dunstan bunny kit, which was also a gift from my grandmother, so I hope she's not watching this and doesn't know that I haven't finished it yet. It's mostly knitted up. Really hard to kind of gauge how much the yarn is, so what I've tended to do is just weigh the whole thing, and it's kind of a symbolic measurement. Kind of boxed myself into the order I do this in because of how I've piled it up behind me, so let's just treat this like a bit of a lucky dip. This bag, rustle rustle, contains a number of merino possum blend balls which I got from Holland Road Yarn. Tash at Holland Road Yarn is a mate of mine, and she does this great thing called the Reloved collection, I guess, which is yarn from people's stashes that they're just like, I'm never going to use this, I'd like to resell it. You can get some really good stuff at a little bit of a discount on the retail price, and sometimes that's very dangerous, Tash, and that's your fault. So let's see what we've got in here. So as I get to yarns that I already have definite project plans for, I'm going to mention what the pattern is and, where possible, what its maximum size is, because it's very important to me, obviously, to promote designers who are making size inclusive patterns. So this yarn in this lilac, red, grey and purple, which is not a colour combo I would have put together, but it was the colours available, so I figure that's a challenge to make it work, is going to be the Sophia Crochet Cardigan by Burgundy and Blush, which goes up to a 62-inch bust. At the latest Willington, I also picked up secondhand a couple of books of sock knitting. This is the year. This is the year I learned to knit socks. I've knitted a couple of baby socks before, but never really gotten into it as a routine, and I feel like it's one of those things where the more you do it, the easier it is, or the more you figure out what techniques you like. That may not happen till Socktober, but at least then I'll have the drive of Socktober to knit socks with. That is to say, naturally I had to pick up some sock yarn to go with the sock books, right? Also living in this basket is some more reloved yarn I got from Holland Road Yarn. I may have a problem, which I was going to use to make the gingham jumper by Jessie Made Designs, but there wasn't actually enough contrast for the darker parts of this with the very, very dark brown / black. So I'm going to make a different stripy cardigan, or rather stripy jumper, which will be the Jailbird Blouse by Poison Girls, which goes up to a 54.5-inch bust. Still a bit of room in that basket, so let's see if there's something else I can fit in there. Aha! So we did a pre-Christmas family trip away up north to Hastings, which has Splash Planet. Highly recommend if you're over in the Hawke's Bay area, and also a lot of great wineries. So naturally I had to buy a special skein of yarn. I love these colours. This is the Strawberry Patches yarn, Sock Merino 4-ply, 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon, in the colour Witch's Cauldron. How could I not? And then there is 5 skeins of the BC Garn Bio Balance, which is a organic wool, organic cotton blend, which I love for knitting for my daughter. This is going to be the mini unbearable hoodie by Les Garçons, except I got blue as the contrast colour, and I'm pretty sure I'll want to get yellow instead because it makes the bears' faces and the middle of the flowers. So that's going to need a project, and I'm going to need to buy another skein of yarn. Let's go through some of the sets I already have in bags. This is a bulk lot of a kind of minty green bry nylon that a friend got me as a gift, which is just a very cool little vintagey nylon-y yarn that I probably want to make a vintagey, I suspect 70s or 80s pattern with. If you've got any ideas, do please drop them in the comments below. These are meant to be an ounce. That's not a measurement. This is another cute little vintage number. I kind of love this, even though it will definitely not knit up in my size, because it is a Fair Isle kit for those who do not wish to learn how to knit Fair Isle, which means, along with all of this lovely, I mean, let's be honest, quite scratchy, 100% new wool from Scotland, they also give you the pre-knitted Fair Isle collar. So you literally take it off its kind of provisional cast on and just have to do all the stocking stitch. Now I love doing color work, so to me this is hell, but I kind of loved the idea of it so much that I bought it, and I thought, you know, who knows, maybe I'll make it up at some point as a novelty. Here's what I mean about buying in quantities and not knowing when I was early in my knitting journey what a good quantity was. I went to a Wool on Wheels, love Wool on Wheels, show, and got these 2 sets, which were actually made up to be Stephen West mystery knit-alongs. I love Stephen West, but I will never participate in one of his mystery knit-alongs because I have a certain aesthetic and it's very different to Stephen West's. And I love him, he seems like a great guy, I am so happy for his success, but I just bought these because these were collections of yarn that were pretty and I liked them. And I didn't really have a plan. And then I kind of got to looking for patterns that would work with them. In my size, there weren't many. So we're just going to be stripy for a bit. So the pink, purple and gold set is going to become a Monomania by Anne Weaver, which goes up to a 55-inch bust. And the pink and green set is going to become a Gilet Macia by Lisa Taylor, which goes up to a 47.5-inch bust. I should say these are all New Zealand indie dyed yarns, and they are beautiful, but I don't think I have the battery time or the time until we have to go pick up our daughter from kindy to go through them all. If you want me to go into more detail of some of my projects, let me know. This isn't really going to be a knitting channel, but I knit and I crochet, so I may as well cover it sometimes when I'm not yapping about science fiction. Crinkle Crinkle, this hand-dyed Broadway yarn is going to be a Frenchy sweater by Poison Girls, which goes up to a 53-inch bust. Let's stick with our New Zealand indie dyed fancy stuff. The acrylics over there, it's haunting me, but lucky dip. This green and blue set is going to be a surprise present for someone who's definitely going to watch this, so shh. Really going with a blue-green theme here. There's a political joke to make, but we don't have the time for it. Each of these, 3 skeins of each, is going to be the Classic Tee by Kay Hopkins, which goes up to 64.5 inches. This black and silver set from Dark Harbour Yarns is going to be a pair of the Rokeby mitts by Victoria Magnus. Orange Yarn by Spud and Chloe is actually a remnant from a hat I knit for a friend earlier this year. So let's actually see how much that weighs. This is a scrap bag, so I really enjoyed making the crochet scrap blanket behind me. This is where I am keeping oddments of DK merino. I also have another one for just generic wool. But what I like to do with these is just weigh the whole bag because I'm not going to go through every scrap. Okay, I think that's the hand dyed done. Let's move on to some of the plastic containers. This is labeled 2-ply and 3-ply. It's got chunky yarn in it. This is what I'm talking about. This yarn is another bear themed project for my daughter. It is going to be the Benetton Bear Hooded Cowl by Ava Girl Designs. I've knit some very fine baby shawls over the past couple of years, which means I have a bunch of 3-ply and 2-ply, which I don't really know what to do with. Any ideas in the comments? Whole bunch of Socks Yeah by Co-op Knits, Coop Knits. Just gonna weigh the whole bag. This can just be very fine and very chunky yarn, right? I have 2 containers of cotton. This is the DK. You can tell there's just a lot of scraps here from failed projects. And that can just all go back in there. The first of the acrylic. Giant pile of chenille, including a couple of pieces that I really should frog and turn into something. Alright, let's talk about the cones. So, part of the problem of being a knitter in Wellington is that we are the home of the Wool Yarns factory. And a couple of times every year, at least once every year, they have a factory sale, and they often sell off big packs of yarn where they've discontinued the colour, and also cones. I'm not sure if any of these still have a price on them. Okay, this is about half its size. This was $50. This was $30, and it's merino possum blend. This one is just mohair, and it was $15, 1.5. And this chunkus is a wool merino blend, and it was $40. Now, to get political for a minute, I am involved in the Green Party, so this merino cotton blend is perfect for knitting up things for giveaways and raffles and that kind of thing. This is just a gorgeous colour. I've never knitted in mohair. And this, I mean, for a start, black DK? Gonna say DK is always good. I may be completely wrong because there is a pattern I know I want to make with this, chicken word, and it is the Kraken shawl by Alex Mickelborg. So whatever the weight of that is on Ravelry, that's the weight this cone is. You know, can't turn down a good bargain, can I? So let's see what the damage is here. It's 1.4 kilo. Just this one. Look, in my defense, and something that Jay, my partner, will always say when I do go to the wool yarn sale, is I do use these up. Last year there was also a white DK woolen cone that has all gone. It got turned into a version of that Call the Midwife blanket pattern that everyone loves and was given away to Crafting Threads of Aroha. So hopefully that cone of yarn is now keeping some babies warm. But I do want to crack into some of these because they are intimidating in a way that balls of yarn are not. That gives us access to the acrylics. So there's a lot happening here. This is just a bag of scraps. And then these two are just vaguely split down the lines of fingering weight-ish and DK weight-ish. And what I intend to do with both of those is just make granny scrap blankets until I run out of each, and then if they are baby blanket sized, great. If they're lap blanket sized, great. And if they're adult sized blankets, great. I just want them out of my house. I'm going to total all of these up and not really bother breaking it down because they're all just going to be scraps for the scrap gods. A nice round 400. I do not know what to do with this, but I just can't bring myself to throw it all away. So probably something crafty, something kitschy. I've got a toddler. I know I'm contradicting myself. I'm weighing the bits that need to be frogged, but we are onto 2 tubs of 4-ply, cotton and wool. Plan for this is a second hooded scarf, literally the hooded scarf pattern by Maria Lepner. I've got these 5 balls of Jamieson and Smith Shetland wool, which obviously calls out for colour work, but I just don't know what. These are very happy oddments left over from 2 shawls that I knit friends, one for a valedictory and one for a wedding last year. I don't know what I'll do with them, they're very special. I have no idea what this is connected to. I'm going to check last year's stock take for what that one is. This is leftovers from a Peggy Sue cardigan I knitted myself, which to be honest, I'm not entirely thrilled with. So that might be one for the frogging pile, and try to find a cardigan that's just got a bit better ease and not quite so high a neckline. This is wrong lid. Okay, we're on the home stretch. This is a combination of a bunch of random pinks and purple mohair, which came from my friend's stash, and a whole bunch of quite rough, violent purple wool from a wool yarn sale. That the plan has always been some kind of large gauge, airy, floaty wrap thing that I would never wear, but someone else would probably love to bits. I feel like this is one that I could very quickly get out of the way. I just need to have the motivation for it. And I'm going to weigh the whole bag because I can't be asked unpacking it. Okay, the last box of the current stash, that's foreshadowing, is the random DKs, and one worsted. And one Abbey Road cotton. Here is the DK wool that isn't merino scraps. The remnants of various balls of BC Garn BioBalance. I'm going to turn these into a striped non-stop top for my daughter. I love this pattern. It's very mindless. It's all over rib, so it stretches endlessly. She's already had 2 of them, but now she's gotten bigger, so she needs a bigger one, and I figure making a kind of zany, stripy vest would be pretty cool. The last survivor of my daughter's temperature blanket. Oop, I tell a lie. You'd think that would be the end of it. You would be wrong. But first I need lunch. Okay, we're back. Lunch has been eaten. Lipstick has been reapplied. I said that we'd come to the end of the stash. And that's true on paper. If you were to look at the spreadsheet of my stash from the last year, from 2024, but that's because I play a little trick on myself. You see, it would be really super demoralizing to get to the end of a year when the spreadsheet is telling you you've used 320 balls of yarn, not true, to then kind of ruin it all with a sudden injection of more yarn. And that's a problem when the Wool Yarns factory has an end of year factory sale. Point is that I've made a habit in previous years of not counting any end of year Wool Yarns purchases on my total, because if I'm buying it at the end of October or mid-November, there's no way I'm going to get to it by the end of the year, so that would be unfair on me. That's a problem for January, Stephanie, to figure out. So, it's possible I'm beating around the bush a bit and should just get to it. So we need to add this to the stash. Almost all of the stuff I've previously been weighing. I know I already have the composition, the brand, the weight details on previous years' stock takes, so I can just double check those where I've just shorthanded and written unlabeled blue. These are brand new, so I need to take full details and weights, and then I thought what might be fun is to compare them to what I might spend for an equivalent weight in retail yarn. None of these are actual retail lines that Zelana sells, but frequently Zelana has been the only brand where I can get a comparable weight and composition. Let's start with the most boring one first. Okay, first up we have, oh, voice broke a little there. First up we have 1.356 kilo. This one I'm comparing to Naturally Yarns, which is $13 a ball. I got this cone for $55. This one is 100% wool, chunky weight. I am comparing this to the Naturally Yarns Big Natural Wool colours. So that's about a $69 saving. Nice. This is lace weight. It is a wool possum blend. And what I want to make with this is the Buddleia blouse by Retro Claude. Because again, buying for this size, and the Buddleia only comes in 3 sizes, so it goes up to a 54-inch bust, but it's only in 3 sizes. So probably going to need a lot of yarn, probably wasn't going to ever pay retail prices for, I think it's 1,700 meters of yarn. I would compare this one to the Zelana Kiwi lace. It's a wool possum mix, it's 2-ply, and of course they do that in 40-gram balls, because why wouldn't you? I paid $40 for it. The 2 purples. Now these I don't have specific projects in mind for. However, what occurred to me while I was rationalizing buying these at the Wool Yarns factory is these are the kind of quantities where I could look at knitting a dress for myself. Again, fat, need more yarn, especially need more yarn if I'm going to try to get something like knee length. So I don't have a specific pattern in mind, but that's probably the plan with these. If not, they'll definitely be garments, maybe a longer cardigan or something like that. Let's do the, what are we going to call that? It's not burgundy, it's too purple to be burgundy. 1.146 kilo. This is the one I was going to compare to the Ashford DK, which is a very nice workhorse yarn. I paid $25. $25. I don't want to encourage consumerism, but honestly, this is like the absolute epitome of bulk buying saving you money. Last but not least, we have, oh yeah, she's so soft. She's 100% camel. The closest I could find to compare this to was an 80% merino, 20% camel 4-ply, which was $25 per 50 grams. That would be $550 worth of yarn. I paid $60. My self-rationalization exercise is going very well, thank you. I think all up this was about, and this is off memory, not off just looking at them now, it was about $210. Again, I only buy yarn at specialty stores when I'm traveling or at special yarn events, which is either indie dyer festival kind of things or the wool yarn sale. So $210 in one spend is not an everyday occurrence for me. However, that's over $1,000 worth of yarn. That's $1,123 worth of yarn, conservatively, because I can't find these exact colors, weights, and compositions. Okay, I don't know what the total is right now because it's all written down on this. And yes, the eagle-eyed amongst you will notice the very dated Labour Party stationery I'm using. If anyone from the New Zealand Labour Party, comrades, wants to tell me how long it's been since you were using the New Zealand flag logo, this has got to be late 90s, early 2000s. So where to from here? We've pulled everything out, we've weighed it, I've got notes. These need to be typed up. As I say, I do put them into a Word document first, just in a table, because for some reason my brain really likes using that as a reference point. Then the numbers go into a spreadsheet. I will hopefully be able to show you some of that spreadsheet. And these need to be put away. One of the bags has actually just disintegrated on me, so I'm going to have to find a different container for the merino possum blend. And more importantly, I can start knitting again. I've been holding myself back because I didn't want to interfere with the count, which is why I've been doing some charity knitting. But yeah, let's see how I do in 2025. So this is the starting point. All of the information, including when I got it, colours, colour names, weights, and possible projects,
go into the table. Like so. Because I've done this a few years running, I tend to copy-paste in the information from the previous year's stocktake so I don't have to retype all the details, just update the numbers. Then critical information like date of purchase and quantity goes into the table. I like to include date of purchase, so I'm prompted to think about what I've had the longest and how I might use it up. These are the categories that work for my brain, but I've also seen people sort by brand or dyer or even group by colour. I set up formulas in the spreadsheet so all the yarns in each category total to the top automatically, both the starting amount and the amount I've used up, and then those totals are brought down to the bottom to be added into a running tally, which also shows the current stash size. You can, and I probably will, add all sorts of additional formulas and fields like a progress calculator comparing the amount used to how far through the year we are, or which categories I've used up the most by percentage. It's a really fun way to get to grips with spreadsheet software if that's your kind of thing. Here's my favourite trick. To make your groups collapsible, if you've got a lot of lines of data and don't want to be scrolling up and down the whole time or find the whole spreadsheet to be quite visually overwhelming, you can add all the yarns to a specific category, then select those lines, go to the Data ribbon, click Group, and for some reason, click Group again, and voila, your rows disappear. You can always open it back out if you want to check details or adjust your quantities, and hiding the rows doesn't affect the math. At least, that's how it works in Excel. I can only assume other spreadsheet software has similar functions.
So here endeth my first Yarn Stash Stocktake video. It was just as much fun as I thought it would be. If you are interested to see more about what I make with this, or if you want me to do a half-yearly check-in or maybe an end-of-year check-in, I am very open to suggestion. This isn't just going to be a knitting and crochet and fibre YouTube channel, but it is a very significant part of my life, as you can see. So I am very happy to talk more about it down the barrel of a camera. If you don't have any answers to any of the questions I have raised during the video, but you do have your own yarn stash, or your own yarn goals, your own knitting goals, or your own comments on my obsessive love for natural animal fibres and dislike for cotton and acrylic, please do leave a thoughtful, constructive, but nevertheless boisterous comment below. And I have no idea what the next video will be, but I will hopefully see you there. Ka kite anō.
Lipstick good.